Hey there, welcome to Takeaway with Sam Oches, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Sam Oches, editor-in-chief here at NRN, and this is the show where I give you an all-access pass to the restaurant industry's most influential decision-makers. This week, I'm talking with Larry Ryback, the CEO of Jim and Nick's Community Barbecue, a chain of more than 50 locations across the South that is celebrating 40 years in business with a new store prototype that is helping to drive double-digit sales growth. Indeed, Jim and Nick's new store design takes into account its big growth in off-premises sales, and it shifts away from a full-service model into what they're calling fast casual plus, giving customers more control over their experience by having them order at the counter before sitting down and receiving regular table touches from a team member. About 1/3 of the Jim and Nick's system has been converted over to the new model over the past 3 years, and is a big reason why the brand has enjoyed same-store sales growth now for 4 straight years. That includes over 14% system-wide sales growth in 2024, according to the Technomic Top 500. Larry joined the podcast to talk about what operators should take into account when they're redesigning their physical footprint and how Jim and Nick's is empowering its guests with the changes to its service. In this interview, you will learn more about why menu bloat leads to irrelevancy among your guests, why a restaurant makeover does not need to significantly alter the guest experience, and how fast casual and casual dining can converge into something high quality yet efficient. Before we jump into that interview, though, I am excited to announce that registration is now open for Create, our annual event for emerging restaurateurs. This one-of-a-kind event is tailored specifically for leaders of smaller growing chains who are looking for inspiration, education, and connection with their peers. Already, we have dynamic speakers from Cava, Dutch Bros, Paris Baguette, Let Us Entertain You, and more, with some very exciting speaker announcements around the corner. If you're looking for a smaller, more intimate setting where you can get in the weeds with your fellow operators and learn how to take your brand to the next level, join us at Create in Nashville this October 15th through 17th. Register at create.nrn.com. Jumping now into my interview with Jim and Nick's CEO, Larry Ryback. Also, don't forget to stick around after the interview as I will share my 5 takeaways from this discussion, actionable insights that you can take with you on the go. Okay, I'm sitting down with Larry Ryback, the CEO of Jim and Nick's Community Barbecue. Larry, thanks for joining me today.
Morning, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Larry, excited to talk about Jim and Nick's and the success that you guys have had, which I think is enviable of not just barbecue chains, but I think any multi-unit restaurant brand in America right now is enviable of the kind of success you guys have seen recently. But I don't think we can talk about that success without really kind of rewinding, talking about the beginning and, you know, this brand, where it came from. Obviously, I know you've been with Jim and Nick's for about 5 years now. But this is you could call it a legacy concept. It's been around now for decades. Could you share
Absolutely.
a bit more about Jim and Nick's, the history
Sure.
of it?
Yeah, Jim and Nick's, 40-year-old brand. It's amazing that we just celebrated our 40th anniversary just a few months ago. So been around for a long time. Started as a father-son team, Jim and Nick. Grew the business mainly in Birmingham, a little bit in Atlanta, and sold the business to Rourke Private Equity in 2017. So I've been with Jim and Nick since 2020, so it'll be 6 years in January. But yeah, it's been great. It's a great brand that's always focused on just doing things the right way, kind of the old-fashioned way, and really serving from the heart and being involved in all the communities we're in. So it's in that way, it's just a really pure and true brand. It's one of the things I love most about it.
Yeah. And what was your history pre-Jim and Nick's? Were you in the restaurant industry before?
Yeah, my whole life. You know, I started as a dishwasher and a busboy and worked my way up mainly in the back of the house, and have held, management positions, GM positions, multi-unit, up through chief operating officer for over a decade. And I've been a CEO for about 9 years, 8 or 9 years.
Okay. So coming into Jim and Nick's then, what's your impression of this brand? Because I think I've had a few barbecue brands represented on the podcast before. And I think one thing that's certain about barbecue is that it exudes a kind of personality almost inherently, more so than any other restaurant brand, because it's always so rooted in place. It always is so rooted in the smell, sort of the sensory experience of barbecue. When you were introduced to Jim and Nick's, what was that impression that you got of this brand?
It was just that. What I love most about the brand is, again, I said it earlier, but we do things the old-fashioned way. We do things from scratch. Everything that we make, every food-wise, everything that we make is made in-house in every restaurant every day. No freezers, no microwaves, nothing coming in the back door pre-made. In that regard, I love that we're kind of, as I said, pure and true and old-fashioned in that regard, and that hasn't changed. I think those are the real core, tenets of the brand. And then I think the other thing, whether it's a Southern thing or it's a barbecue thing or it's a combination of both, there is such a genuine desire to serve and to treat guests like family that it's something that I felt my very first experience with the brand. And I think it really is. It's kind of the secret sauce, so to speak.
Gotta love that Southern hospitality.
For
Having
sure.
lived in the South for 13 years, that's something I miss a little bit, but I get a little bit in the Midwest. There's a version of that. Okay, so you come in, and I don't want to say what did you see as being wrong with Jim and Nick's, but what did you see as being maybe the opportunities to evolve as a brand when you started?
Sure. I think like a lot of companies, and it's all born out of a desire to serve and a desire to be as relevant for your guests as possible. But the menu got pretty big, pretty difficult to execute. Trying to, I think if you try to be all things to all people, one of the saying is, you end up being nothing to no one. And I'm not saying that was the case with Jim and Nick's, but I think we were trying to do too much. And you think about the way a company grows over decades, you could imagine if you're not really careful, if you're not really disciplined, the menu could get pretty unwieldy just a little bit, one menu item a year over, 20, 30 years, and you got a pretty big menu. So I did notice that. And we just weren't able to execute the things that mattered most to our guests at the level that we really needed to not only be competitive, but to win in the space.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've talked about sort of that purity, that authenticity of this concept. I mean, when you make some decisions about change, are there any sacred cows, no pun intended, but, is there anything here that you cannot sacrifice because you have to maintain that purity?
Well, first and foremost, food quality. Again, we're not going to bring anything in the door pre-made. We're not going to compromise the quality that comes in the back door. I just think it's too important. I think the guest notices the difference. And I think our team members, our managers and our hourly team members and the pride they have in the brand matters. And I think that's something that we were very mindful of, is just how proud people are internally at what we do.
Mm. Were you doing focus groups then too? I mean, because obviously what the guest thinks about the concept is critical. I mean, were you listening to them to find out what they wanted from Jim and Nick's?
Yeah, it was part of the brand work we did early on, is to figure out who's our core customer, what do they like about us, what could we do better, where do we really win, and how do you think about as you think about evolving a brand and beginning to set up a company for growth. How do you really narrow down your focus to the things that matter most? And so that was really early brand work that we did.
Yeah. All right. So last question I asked before we really dig into some of the changes you made, thinking about, again, taking yourself back 5-6 years, coming into this brand, making a plan for what you wanted to do with Jim and Nick's. With a barbecue brand, sometimes I wonder if barbecue has a lower ceiling than other categories. Just because if you're launching a fried chicken brand, conceivably every community in America is your white space. Barbecue, sometimes I wonder, is that true of barbecue? So when you come in and you maybe set some goals, you say, I want to change this and that in order to accomplish X, Y, and Z. What did you hope to accomplish? What were the goals that you hope to accomplish?
Really just to be able to execute at a level on the things that matter most in every restaurant, that we're in, every market that we're in. Just make sure guests are having great experiences. It's that simple. Mm-hmm.
And the footprint has always primarily been the Southeast. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. It's broadened a little bit. So the Southeast is getting a little bit, further east, further west, further north, and further south for us as we grow. But
yeah. So, or a Sunbelt, I guess you could call it. Some people call that smile, sort of the Southwest over into the Southeast, Texas, all of those kinds of states. That seems to be kind of your sweet spot.
Yeah. We're not in Texas yet, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Texas is a big barbecue state.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I have to imagine Texas is on the radar for every barbecue brand, I guess that, leads me to wonder, like, do you envision Jim and Nick's pushing into new markets, or is the goal here to really double down on the ones you own?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, with our current growth aspirations, we need to be able to grow into new markets to satisfy those. So, but there's still a lot of white space in the markets we're in. So we're looking to fill in Greater Birmingham, Northern Alabama, Georgia, and Greater Atlanta. We're in Nashville and now in Knoxville. So we'll continue to infill those markets. We do have a smattering of restaurants in the Carolinas. We're looking to grow both North Carolina and South Carolina. And we really just entered the Florida Panhandle about 2 years ago. So we're looking to grow that out as well.
I think it's safe to say, too, at this point that the whole barbecue region is a non-factor for barbecue chain growth, right? Nobody cares in the Carolinas that you're not doubling down on Carolina barbecue, right?
Look, I think more is made of that than really should be. I think what people want is just great barbecue. What we try to do is honor the legacy of barbecue in all the places and all the markets that we go to. We try to be the best version of what that style of barbecue is known for. So, for example, brisket for us is a traditional Texas style brisket because Texas is why brisket's famous. So it's pretty simple: kosher salt, black pepper, low and slow, 12-hour cook time. And then as we get into the Carolinas, we do have Carolina sauces. Just to honor those traditions and the things that those guests expect in those markets.
Yeah. All right. So getting now into the changes that have been made. The biggest change that you've made here is you've developed this beautiful prototype. And I have to point out, I have seen this video that you guys made showing off the prototype. And this is like prototyping 101, in my opinion, that I often see these renderings and sketches of prototypes, but you guys made this gorgeous video because you built out this new design and you made this incredible video that I imagine, for franchisees, for investors, whomever, this is such a great look at what you guys have made of Jim and Nick's in the physical footprint. Why was the store design itself such a critical part of getting this kind of next version of Jim and Nick's right?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we realized as the company grew is that the demand for how to use restaurants differently has changed over time. So when our early restaurants were built, they're predominantly dine-in focused, with takeout being a little bit of an afterthought. And then same with drive-through, which is sort of a simple single lane drive-through. And this is going back 20 years or more. And then what we thought about as we looked to redefine this new prototype was how do you right size the physical plant to match the different revenue channel demands? And so our takeout business had grown considerably over a couple decades since the first prototypes were created. Same with drive-through. And COVID certainly escalated that demand for off-prem. So when we just looked at where are the sales coming in and how do we best optimize the building, the physical plant, to match the demand for those respective channels. So dine-in got a little bit smaller. The capability to execute takeout became a little bit, more robust. Drive-through became optimized with double lane and curbside tablets and drive-through tablets and full canopies and stuff like that. So we really just tried to, almost contemporize the building to match what the demand was.
And that idea of contemporizing something such as a barbecue concept that's been around 40 years, again, that is so committed to, as you say, the sort of purity of what it is there risk there? Because do some customers push back at this idea that, oh, you've got this tablet powered drive through? That's not what Jim and Nick's is. Like, did you see any of that risk?
No, we really didn't. I think, if it reduces friction and gives the guest the ability to use the brand more efficiently, better, faster, I think the technology is more on the restaurant, on the team member side. We're not pushing that over to the guests with kiosks and stuff like that. So from a guest perspective, it's not really different. We try to make it a little bit more efficient or a little faster by leveraging technology and stuff.
Yeah, and I love also the sort of aesthetic of the new prototype too. It's different, a little bit different than most barbecue. I mean, most barbecue there's a lot of emphasis on wood, just because of course you're smoking wood, and
Sure.
there's some of those visual touches. I mean, you guys opted for this really kind of clean, sort of black and white tile. Walk me through the aesthetic of this new prototype.
Yeah, when we were doing some of the brand research, one of the things we found is that a lot of barbecue chains look the same. And they're pretty dark, lots of wood, they're dark wood, red brick, rusted metal, neon, those types of things. And we want to differentiate ourselves a little bit. Wanted to be a little bit, a little more female friendly as well, and wanted to create something that would feel as relevant for the next 20, 30 years as Jim and Nick's has been for the past 20, 30 years.
Than the service of what you're doing. You guys don't own QSR, fast casual, full service. You're something in the middle of all of these things. Walk me through the service style, what you kind of consider this.
We like to call it fast casual plus. And the plus part is, I'll back up for just a second. It's similar to a fast casual experience, and guests order from a queue line at a counter. They get their own beverage and they choose their own seat. That's where the fast casual part ends. And from there through the experience, it's much more like a casual dining experience, in that we bring the food, we do a check back for you. We'll bring our famous cheese biscuits to every table. We'll make sure beverage refills are taken care of. We'll offer dessert. We'll bring a to-go box. All that stuff after the guest sits is the same as a casual dining experience. We just really try to layer in hospitality to every touch point possible.
And was Jim and Nick's prior to this, was it full service, or was it a hybrid before? It was all full service.
We're still about half the system, a little more than half the system actually is still full service casual dining.
Gotcha. So then shifting to that fast casual plus model, where you've got some counter service, but you've got the high table touch. How does that make things more efficient, more cost effective? I mean, I imagine in this season of labor that we're going through, perhaps it helps with hiring.
Sure. Well, it's less people required because you don't need as many servers as there is a front of the house position. We have kind of it's server position. They don't take the orders, but it's the same food delivery. It's check back, drink refill, all that stuff. So that part's the same, but you don't need quite as many of those people. The other part, the biggest difference we noticed was it's a faster experience for guests, because you don't have all those little times that you wait, whether you wait at the host stand to be seated, or you wait for your server to visit the table, or you're waiting for your check at the end of the experience, and then you're waiting for the check to be processed. Like, all that stuff goes away, and it's a much faster experience, which gives people the ability to use us in different ways. If they want a leisurely experience, you can still have that, whether it's for a family weekend dinner or a date night. But if you want, fast everyday convenience for a business lunch, or, working families at dinner, you can get it in and out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I like that DIY approach. It's kind of like choose your own adventure, do whatever you choose, whatever experience you want from Jim and Nick's. And you have a full bar too, right? So they can get up and go get a drink at the bar. Then I imagine that drives a lot of dinner business. What's the split there on lunch dinner?
It's close to 50-50. It's a little heavier at dinner, and a lot of that's driven by the check average at dinner is a little bit higher than the check average at lunch.
Gotcha. I got to say, too, as a parent of 3 young kids, this to me is also a dream, because it's like that DIY approach. We're usually getting in and getting out very quickly. But if I'm ever at a full service restaurant with kids and we're waiting for a service member to come and take our order or do anything, and I'm like, my arms are doing like, here, give you a toy, give you a crayon, feed the baby, it's a little chaotic. So this idea of doing it yourself, I love. But you're also doing that through the various service functions, with drive-through, with delivery. I think you mentioned some of the numbers, the breakdown of your sales channels, and it was remarkable to me how evenly split across all of these are. It's not like any one of them is sort of more of a specialty. You guys really are, you have an even number of sales, I guess, within every channel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's more evenly distributed than most of certainly what I've ever experienced, but we're only about 40% dine-in. The other 60% is through the off-prem channels. And the majority of that is takeout and drive-through. And then there's about 10% of our sales revenue comes from catering.
Yeah, catering is a huge opportunity. A lot of people
Yeah,
talking about it more and more today, especially return to office. There's a lot more momentum toward return to office. I imagine catering is in your crosshairs for really leaning into
for
that.
sure. It's a huge part of our business. I mean, not just because of the revenue of it, but it gives you an opportunity to get out and be involved in the community, which is sort of this, it's an ancillary benefit that I think is more important than a lot of people realize.
And barbecue is such a perfect fit for
It really
catering.
is.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
just,
it's
yeah,
super shareable. It travels well. Yeah, barbecue lends itself to off-prem catering real well.
sure. Okay, so rolling out this new prototype. I mean, I imagine the development of this thing took you a while. Tell me about, bringing it to market. Having one out there that you could kind of test and kick the tires of. What then does the rollout become for your system?
Yeah, so this goes back to we developed the concept during COVID, and we tested it in our first restaurant out just outside of Atlanta. We converted it. It was a restaurant that was open for about 6 months, and COVID hit. We had to shut down the dining rooms just like everybody else, and so we went to work at converting that from a full service restaurant to a fast casual restaurant. And the part of the reason for doing that was just to measure guest acceptance, and the other part of it was to figure out frankly, how to do it, how to execute it. And so learned a lot from that experience. It was really well received, which was great. And then we opened our first restaurant about 6 months later in Sharpsburg, Georgia, so south of Atlanta, as a full-on fast casual restaurant. And from there, everything we've opened has been that service format. But we've evolved a little bit from a prototype standpoint in the past 3 years. So we're kind of really nothing majorly different, just more fine tuning based on what we've learned.
You're up to close to, I think, 20 locations that have this new design, right?
Yep, we open I want to say it's number 18 in Savannah, Georgia, a week from this coming Wednesday.
Okay. So then I imagine all new builds become this new design, but then what does the retrofitting look like
Yep.
too?
Yeah, we're trying to be thoughtful and careful with that. And we've converted a couple restaurants. We've remodeled a handful of restaurants, and we'll continue to do that. Whether we make the change to fast casual or stay full service is really going to depend on the market and having a good understanding of who our customer is in that market and what they want and how they want to use us. So we're not taking the approach that we're going to convert every casual dining restaurant to fast casual, but where we think it makes sense as we remodel restaurants, we'll consider that service change.
Sure. Okay, so going from full service to this fast casual plus, and considering this new store design, how does that change your approach to growth? Because obviously we've got this great contemporary, beautifully executed restaurant now. Does that change the type of real estate you look at, the type of market you want to move into? How does that evolve that growth plan?
Not so much, not really. I mean, I think we look for the same great real estate attributes as everyone else, but no, the difference in the prototype doesn't change that so much.
Okay. You and I are talking in the week that we're getting ready to launch our top 500, our annual top 500 in partnership with Technomic, which is of course a sort of benchmark for performance across the top 500 chains. I'm looking at the numbers right now. Jim and Nick's, you guys did double digit unit and sales growth. But importantly, according to the top 500, your sales growth outpaced your unit growth. So we're not talking just adding stores and everything's flat. You guys are growing. And again, this is not the case for 60 odd percent of the top 500 was essentially flat or down when considering inflation. So again, enviable to the industry. What's the secret? I mean, obviously rolling out this new design for those 18 locations, that's a great thing. But this is also in your older designed restaurants too. You guys seem to be really hitting on something here. What do you think that is?
Look, we've been really fortunate. I mean, I think we're in our fourth year of positive same store sales growth, and we haven't taken a lot of price, and which I think is part of the secret. Honestly, is we've resisted the temptation to take a lot of price. So that's part of it. I think back to what I said earlier. I think people want great quality food. We're maniacal about that. So from the products we bring in the back door to how we handle them, how we execute them, the quality of our recipes, and then just that. Our maniacal focus on executing at a high level, it's a cultural thing. It's not something that, that I push down or that the senior ops team pushes down. It's just something that there are a lot of like-minded people who are really passionate about food. That certainly helps. And I think the other part of it is we hire people who want to serve. I mean, I think we all have we try to hire people with a servant's heart or a servant heart. I want my team to have that. I think my team is there to serve the people who serve the guests. And I think that sends the right message through the organization. That's a big part of it. I think the other part of it is we're not getting over our skis and trying to do too much, but doing more isn't necessarily better. It's doing what matters most to the guest at a really high level consistently, day in and day out, I think is what matters most.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I imagine too, there's an element here when I think about, restaurants experiencing declining sales. Of course, we have the issue of customers pulling back on their discretionary spend. And when you're looking at how much you're spending on restaurants and you start to pull back, you start to, axe some of those occasions from your calendar, you're not going to pull back on those experiences that make you feel good, that you go to with your family and you get good hospitality, you get good food. You might be pulling back on, some of that quick luxury, indulgent, whatever, but you don't pull back on that thing that is like, we go there every week for family dinner. And that's important to us because it's more than just the food. And to me, it seems like Jim and Nick's maybe fits some of that and the role it plays in customers' lives. Does that track with you?
I certainly think so. Yeah. I think we try to be mindful that everyone works really hard for their money. Everyone wants to feel good about how they spend their money. And from my perspective, my team and what we try to keep top of mind for everyone in every restaurant is that stuff matters. Treat our guests the way you'd want to be treated.
Yeah. Okay. What's next for Jim and Nick's now that you have this great new store design? You're rolling that out. Is that the focus for a while?
It is. Well, we're continuing to learn. One of the things about growing is you develop a prototype and then you grow it. You're constantly learning from it, but your growth is, our growth is continuing to ramp up. So the challenge is how do you take those learnings and integrate them into what you're growing? So we're continuing to do that. We've opened 7 restaurants in 2024. We'll open 8 in 2025. We've got a pipeline target for 9 or 10 in 2026. But all that's predicated on continuing to do a good job day in and day out and try to keep some of the sales and traffic trends that we've been so fortunate to have. I think that's incredibly important is as the CEO to make sure that we don't forget we've earned the right to grow by executing the core of our business well enough every day to take share and grow top line. If for some reason that goes sideways, then all bets are off. And like any company, you got to pull back on growth. So right now things are great. We're trying to keep them great. And we're just trying to thoughtfully accelerate growth.
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, the concept of innovation, right now we see so many restaurants kind of panic innovating, right? You come up with some new menu items, try, put that into your marketing. You're trying to staunch the bleeding here, right? There is a pressure to innovate no matter what, right? You don't want to be caught years down the road feeling like you're an outdated concept. You got to keep up with the times and contemporize, as we've been talking about. But sometimes innovation doesn't have to be, here's a new menu item, or here's a new marketing campaign, or here's a new doodad. Innovation can mean other things. I'm wondering what innovation really means to you and to Jim and Nick's.
Look, we're super thoughtful about it, especially when it comes to menu innovation. And because as I said earlier, we went through this challenge we had years back where the menu had gotten really big. And then the challenge is how do I pare it down without alienating guests who were coming in for some of those items that you're going to take off the menu. And so the challenge is let's not repeat that. But balancing that for a need for thoughtful new menu innovation. So we try to be really thoughtful about it and don't do too much, I think is the other challenge. And you got to be able to execute it at a high level. So if anything you're thinking about adopting compromises your ability to execute the core of your brand, what you're known most for, then I think you gotta take a pause,
Yeah. All right, Larry, last thing I want to just quickly touch on, you have this word community now, Jim and Nick's community barbecue. I want to ask you what that means to Jim and Nick's. What's the community piece of this?
Look, it's there it's there for a reason. We really want to be a part of every community that we serve. And it's being good neighbors inside the four walls, but it's also being involved in people's lives and being involved in the community outside the four walls, because that's where our team members live. That's where our managers live. We know that's kind of the stickiness to a brand, is that people want to feel that you're a part of the community that they live in. So it's really important to us.
That's good stuff. Larry Ryback, the CEO of Jim and Nick's Community Barbecue. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much, Larry.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it.
That was my interview with Jim and Nick's CEO, Larry Ryback. So what should you learn from this interview? Here are my 5 takeaways. My first takeaway is that treating your guest as family can be a huge differentiator. Everybody says this, right? Everybody wants to claim great hospitality and treating their guest as family, but are you really doing it? Southern hospitality, that's kind of what it's all about. And this is one of the reasons why I love barbecue restaurants. I love anything really steeped in that Southern hospitality, because there's something about it that just drives this natural friendliness, connection, and community that you don't get everywhere. Jim and Nick's is really thriving on that kind of hospitality. As Larry said, 40 years, they've been treating their guests as family. And that's something that Jim and Nick's consumers continue to come back looking for. So obviously, as this brand was going through this new prototype process and redesigning the restaurants, that was one of those things that could not be sacrificed. But I wanted to add this to my list of takeaways, mostly to flag it, because beyond barbecue, beyond Southern hospitality, this ability to treat your guests as family is so crucial in this period of time that we're in right now, where customers are pulling back on their spend, inflation is high, economy is bad. At the end of the day, customers are looking for a great experience where they feel good. And they might want lower price points. They might want, of course, high quality food, but they want to leave having, felt really good for the hour, 2 hours, whatever it took them to eat. And when you treat your guests with that kind of hospitality that makes them feel like family, it's exactly what they're looking for. And I'm not saying that the quality of the food is irrelevant or the price point's irrelevant, but at the end of the day, that hospitality can be a huge factor as to whether or not they are going to come back. My second takeaway is that menu bloat leads to irrelevancy among your guests. Larry has been CEO for 6 years, and he said, he came in and he could see that this bloat was happening over a long period of time, this creep where over 20 to 30 years, they were adding a couple things here and there, and it got to a point where it was just a bloated menu. And as he said, the old adage goes, if you try to be all things to all people, you become nothing to no one. And he thought that's kind of where they were getting. There wasn't any discipline in that menu innovation. So they had to cut back. They had to streamline their menu. And I love how he put it that, they are focused on being relevant to guests, but by presenting guests with this massive menu where it could be confusing to know what to order or overwhelming, that wasn't being relevant to them. So they had to cut those things back. They had to institute some discipline. And by doing that, they could be more relevant to guests because they could focus more of their attention on those things that they do and do them very, very well. My third takeaway is that your physical footprint must be sized to account for your revenue channels. Jim and Nick's has been around for 40 years. So of course, 40 years ago, there was no such thing as third-party ordering or third-party delivery, no such thing as digital ordering. They did have kind of that single lane drive-through for a while, as Larry said, but for the most part, it was a dine-in business and it was full service. Now, over time, though, Larry said, particularly in COVID, but even before that, off-premises business started to grow and grow to the point that now he says, Jim and Nick's is 40% dine-in and 60% off-premises, with the bulk of that being drive-through and takeout. But their restaurants were not accounting for that. They were still designed to be primarily dine-in focused. So this new store design that they started putting together a few years back, they had to take into account this growth in drive-through, growth in takeout, and they had to design the restaurant that way. So then they now have this double drive-through lane to account for that drive-through business, and they have, set up the restaurant and the ingress and egress so that they can take into account people who are taking out, third-party delivery, all of those things. This is such an important thing to get right in this day and age when off-premises is huge, when people are increasingly turning to delivery or takeout for their restaurant experiences. Even for something that used to be a full-service restaurant and is now, converting into more of a fast casual, you have to think about what your footprint looks like, how that layout what that layout is, how it's designed to function, and to facilitate those revenue channels. So think about your own revenue channels. Where is the growth? And if you're building your physical footprint, or if you're expanding and building new restaurants, think about the growth in those revenue channels so that you can account for them in your new builds. My fourth takeaway is that a restaurant makeover does not need to significantly alter the guest experience. So even though the customers are shifting their business to off premises, Larry talked about just the fact that they had to still, especially for the dining guests, but all guests who come in, ensure that there was this great experience for them and not overwhelm them with new technology or, new ways of doing things. And so I love this point that he made that, a lot of the changes, especially when it came to technology and how that's assisting this new Jim and Nick store design, a lot of that is on the employee side, the operational side, behind, the counter or in the back of the house. It's not in the front of the house. It's not necessarily guest facing. They didn't put kiosks out there. They didn't want to totally disrupt that guest experience. I think that's important because there are a lot of tools and bells and whistles that you can put out there to facilitate the guest experience. And for every restaurant brand, it's going to be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, your guests, it needs to be seamless for them because they don't want to feel overwhelmed or confused. They are coming to your restaurant probably to feel the opposite so that they can feel at rest and relaxed and taken care of. So how do you change your model without altering significantly that guest experience? I think that's an important thing for you to consider. Doesn't mean you can't use kiosks or things that do slightly change the guest experience, but just consider what your customer is going to think of those changes. And if it significantly changes the way they engage with your restaurant, maybe ease into that a little bit more and don't overwhelm them. My fifth and final takeaway is that fast casual and casual dining can converge into something high quality yet efficient. This new model that Jim and Nick's has designed, this new store design, is what they're calling Fast Casual Plus. So here you used to have a casual dining model at Jim and Nick's, a full service, sit down and the waiter takes care of you. Now the guest comes in, they order at the counter, they sit down, and then from there, a store team member takes care of them with lots of table touches, bringing them drink refills and all of that. And I love the point that Larry made about this is that he said, this is really about control for the guest. Because when it's a full service operation, you sit down at your table, you're waiting for your waiter or waitress the entire time. And you are kind of not in control of that. You're spending all of this time waiting. It can extend the time you're in the restaurant, maybe make you a little unhappy, and you're at the mercy essentially of the wait staff. But by switching to this Fast Casual Plus model where they order at the counter, there's also a bar, they can go get a drink. Everything is in the customer's hands. Yes, you still have those table touches where a team member gets refills or gives you that kind of hospitality you expect, but you have more control over how you want to experience the restaurant. So again, if you want to sit for 2 hours and engage with it that way, you can do that. If you want to come in for a quick 30-minute meal with your family and get out, you can do that too. You are not at the mercy of the wait staff. So I think this is an important point because, again, you're making it more of an efficient store process. You can turn tables a lot more quickly as well, so you can get more guests coming through the doors. But at the end of the day, you're not making it a less quality experience by doing that. Again, you're just empowering the guests, making it a little bit faster for them and allowing them that kind of control over the experience so that they can get what they are looking for. By the way, I want to make sure I point out that I will put in the show notes a link to the video of Jim and Nick's new store prototype because I mentioned it in this interview. I think this is a fascinating video, and it is exactly the kind of new prototype video you'll want to make for your own store someday as you're trying to show it off, because it is just does such a good job encapsulating exactly what this new Jim and Nick store prototype looks like. I'll drop that in the show notes, put that on the story page on nrn.com as well. Those are all my takeaways for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to Takeaway wherever you listen to podcasts and leave your feedback. You can also email me at sam.oches@informa.com. Thanks again and talk to you next week.